Welcome to Life Choices. We're so glad that you joined us today. You know, this show is where we talk to important people about all the choices they've made in their lives. And today we have somebody really special for you. His name is George Chanos. And I've known about George for a long time, but today's the first time I've ever met him in person. So I have lots of questions for him, and I'm sure you're going to be really excited about his answers. So welcome, George.
Thank you. It's great to be here and finally meet you, and I've been following you as well.
Oh, it's been great. And we have mutual friends. I know we've both been on Amy's show, Amy Kardashian,
Yes.
a few times. And I've always watched your shows and admired how well you handle yourself.
Well, thank you.
But you've been an attorney, and you were a former Attorney General for the state of Nevada.
Yes.
And you've written 2 books.
Yes.
And now today, we're going to talk about your second book.
Okay.
So tell us about it.
All right, so Millennial Samurai, obviously a lot is going on in the world, right? The world is changing more rapidly and more radically than we've ever experienced. And so people need guidance and direction on how to cope with that change.
Yes.
Darwin said that it's not the most intelligent or the strongest that survive. It's those most capable of adaptation. And so we need to be able to adapt to these changing circumstances, right? Those who are able to do that will be most successful in coping with the changes that are occurring today and that will come in the future. And many more are coming in the future, and they're coming very quickly through advances in technology. So Millennial Samurai is designed to help people deal with that magnitude of change. The technological revolution is actually going to redefine life as we know it, and it's going to come much sooner than any of us realize. Over the next 10 years, artificial intelligence will eclipse human intelligence. And in an event called the Singularity, which Stephen Hawking said would be the greatest event in human history. Ray Kurzweil, the head of Google, AI for Google, says that in an additional 20 years, by the 2040s, so 20 to 30 years from now, artificial intelligence will not be our equal. It will be 1 billion times more capable than human intelligence.
That's amazing.
Amazing.
That is amazing.
So think about the level of change and disruption that that's going to create. Millennial Samurai, if I were to drop you off in the Amazon rainforest and I were going to give you a duffel bag for your survival, there are certain things that I would put in that duffel bag, right? What I've done is I've taken everything that I've learned and everything that I've studied and everything that I've read about and I've distilled it and essentially curated it into what I think people need to know to survive and thrive in the 21st century, to deal with all these changes. And it's done in a very unique way. They're only, the chapters are only 1 to 3 pages long.
Yes, I noticed when I read it, yes.
Yeah, so they're very easy to read. So what did you think of it?
I loved it. Are you kidding? And I loved the style of it. I love the 1 to 3 pages because you've got a lot of chapters.
Right.
But the thing is that they each deal with one particular aspect. And I could go in there and read just about that.
Yes.
For right now.
Exactly.
And if I only had a couple minutes, I could pick up and read a chapter. I love it. I think it's a fabulous book. And the reason you wrote it was?
The reason I wrote it was in 2012, I had a heart attack. And I had a 16-year-old daughter at the time, and I wanted to try to download whatever knowledge I had and leave that to her. So I began writing a letter. That letter turned into my first book, Seize Your Destiny, A Roadmap to Success, which is great advice for young people. Mm-hmm. I'd highly recommend it to young people that are anywhere from 8 to 18 to 20. But all people can get a lot out of Seize Your Destiny. But then what I realized was that I had downloaded my knowledge about my life, my 30-year of professional experience, what I had learned over the past 30 years that had allowed me to succeed. What I hadn't done was I hadn't looked at the next 30 years. I hadn't looked at the future. I hadn't looked at the world that she was going to live in. And so when I began to do that, I was amazed, literally amazed by what I saw. And I thought, I need to share this with her, and I need to share it with other people, and that became Millennial Samurai.
It's a fabulous book. It really is.
Well, thank you.
What was your favorite chapter in it?
Oh, geez. I think probably one of the most important concepts in the book is, there are many, many important concepts. We talk about, thinking for yourself, how the brain functions, how to control your thoughts, how to find the truth, how to find opportunity in adversity is an important chapter, because we all have things happen in our lives.
Yes.
Some of them are positive and some of them are negative. If we only leverage that which is positive that comes to us, we limit ourselves tremendously. And so what we really need to do is we need to take that which happens to us that is not positive and find opportunity in that negative experience,
Yes.
right? What can we
Yes.
learn from it? How can we grow from it? I can give you a perfect example. I'm chairman of the board of a company called Capriati's, right? And we've had this pandemic, right? And the restaurant industry has been devastated by this
Right.
pandemic. Many restaurants have closed. Many businesses are going out of business. In the last 15 weeks, Capriati's has had double-digit increases in sales over the prior year. How are we doing that in a pandemic? We've pivoted, we've adapted, we've moved from in-store sales to online sales. Prior to the pandemic, we were 50% online sales. Today, we're 95% online sales. We're getting into ghost kitchens. Ghost kitchens are industrial buildings that are turned into multiple kitchens. Someone will buy an industrial building. They'll build out 50 kitchens in that industrial building. And companies like Capriati's and Taco Bell and Subway and all the different restaurants that you're familiar with will go in and they will rent, instead of a 1,500 square foot or a 2,000 square
Yes.
foot footprint restaurant,
Uh-huh.
they'll rent a 200 square foot kitchen, and they'll cook their food in that kitchen. And then companies like Uber Eats and Grubhub and DoorDash, instead of driving up to their traditional shop, they'll drive up to the warehouse. And customers who order online will be serviced out of that facility as opposed to a 2,000 square foot facility. It cuts rent costs, it cuts labor costs, it increases profitability. It's a fantastic new area. And we were looking at this before the pandemic. We were ahead of the curve before the pandemic. So when the pandemic hit, we were able to pivot and adapt quickly and effectively. And we've thrived in the pandemic as a consequence. So that's finding opportunity out of adversity.
Yes.
Right? People's preferences are changing. They're ordering from home. They're ordering online. Work with that. Get out ahead of that and service that.
Yes, yes. I find that a lot of people have told me that this pandemic, even though there's been so much about it that's been negative, that they have so many positives that they've found because they've had more family time.
Absolutely.
They've eaten their meals at home with their family. They're having discussions they haven't had for years.
Yes.
And that it's actually made their life somewhat better.
Yeah, it can. It's all an issue of mindset, right? How do you look at what's happening in your life, and how do you address it? How do you adapt to it? And if you have a positive attitude, and if you're constantly looking for opportunity, and if you have a desire to be resilient and to be creative and to find opportunities, and if you're looking for those types of things, you'll find them. If you're negative and you're worried and you're fearful and you're not taking advantage of the new environment, then you'll be a victim of that environment. And I choose not to be a victim. I choose to find opportunity in adversity.
Yes, yes.
And I try to teach people how to do that.
Exactly. And you know, John F. Kennedy said, those who live in the past and not the present are sure to miss the future.
Yes. Yes.
And that's so true.
Yes.
You know, we have to live in the present, and we have to look at what's changed and go forward. I hear so many people saying right now, when things go back to normal, and I want to say to them, things are never going back to normal.
Right.
Things are never going back to like they were before.
Right.
You have to be ready for the new.
Right.
And I think that's what your book does for us. It really helps us to get prepared for the new. I like the part on integrity.
It's huge.
Yeah.
It's fundamental to success. One of the things that a lot of people, if I look back at my life, and I look back at the single factor that most contributed to all of the success, virtually all of the success in my life, it gets back to character and integrity. I mean, people would not have invested money with me if I did not have character and integrity.
Right.
I would not have been appointed by the governor as Attorney General if he didn't believe I had character and integrity. All of my great accomplishments in life can be traced to that simple concept.
And I think many of us who know about you, like I said, I didn't know you personally before today, but we've had a lot of interaction on the internet,
Yes.
and I've met you through other friends' shows and so on. But I think those of us who felt like we knew you, even if we didn't know you personally, really wish that you had stayed in politics. We really wish that you had continued on there because of the integrity and character that you have. What made you make the choice to walk away?
Well, it's a great question and a very fair question. I think that politics has become very poisonous and dysfunctional. And I didn't want that to be part of my life. I wanted to help people. I wanted to make a contribution, but I didn't want toxicity. I didn't want stress and division. I didn't want, money has pervaded politics, and it's a poisonous influence in politics. When you're elected as a public official or appointed as a public official, I go back to my training as a lawyer. And my training as a lawyer tells me that my clients, I owe a fiduciary obligation to my clients. And when I'm a politician, who are my clients? My clients are the 3 million Nevadans. They're all of us, right?
Yes.
They're not the special interests. They're not the people that own the hotels. They're not the people that have made huge investments in our economy and believe that they have a right to control things. Those are part of the clients. Those are some of the clients, but they're not the entire client base. And to properly serve, I believe, you need to represent the entire client base and not give overriding preference to the moneyed interests. And that's really not how politics is today. Today, money pervades politics, and it's a very polarized and divisive environment. I was a moderate. I was not a highly rigid conservative, and I was not a raging liberal. I was a pragmatist, and I wanted to cherry pick the best concepts from the Republicans and from the Democrats. The problem is that when you get into politics, I ran as a Republican. And why was I a Republican? I was a Republican because I believed, as Abraham Lincoln did, that you don't help employees by hurting their employer. That if you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. If you teach a man a fish, you feed him for a lifetime. So I believed in those principles. But the Republican Party has not been advancing those principles. And the Democratic Party is not advancing principles that are good in Republican thought, principles like personal responsibility, right? A lack of victim mentality, right? So we need to pick the best ideas from both parties. And I don't think that that's possible in politics today. I think that it's become too partisan. George Washington warned about this in his inaugural address and about the pervasive and poisonous influence of politics, of partisanship. Mm-hmm. And his speech is read on the Senate floor every year. But apparently no one's listening because we've become more polarized and more divided. And the truth is, not to be found in either the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. The truth is to be found in both parties and in between both parties. And so partisanship will not get us where we need to go. And that's what politics has become. So I made the decision to exit politics, and I made the decision that I would make a contribution outside of politics. And that's what I'm doing today. I'm writing, I'm teaching, I'm speaking, I'm trying to help people, just like I wanted to do when I went into politics. But I'm not doing it through politics. I'm doing it on my own terms, in my own time, in my own way. And I can live a better life that way. and I believe I can make a bigger contribution. I'm more proud of what I've done in this book than serving as Attorney General or a 9-0 victory before the United States Supreme Court. I've done a lot in my life. And the legacy, the richest legacy that I will leave is that book or one that I will write in the future.
Well, you're an incredibly intelligent man, and it's because you study and you learn all the time. You're a
Thank you.
lifelong learner.
I am a lifelong
and
learner.
I believe in that. I too am a lifelong learner. I just think it's so important for us never to stop learning. There's always something new, something different out there. When my mother was 84 years old, she went back to school and learned to use a computer.
Oh my God.
And she'd say, I have to go over to the senior citizen place and bring everything up to date because those old people need help. And I'm like, those old people, you are those old
Yeah,
people, but she was so into lifelong learning, and she instilled that into
Yes,
us, which
yes.
was so important.
It's huge.
And that's one of the reasons I loved your book. There's so many concepts in your book that I had never thought of.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's really stimulating about your book. It's, I read a lot of books where people have written things that are kind of like what somebody else has written before.
Right.
But your book isn't like what anybody else has written before.
Right.
It's got some kind of wild thoughts in there.
Yeah, it does. It does. It has 182 chapters.
Wow.
So it covers a broad spectrum of what you need to know. It goes back to that duffel bag. What goes into that duffel bag? Water, rope, a knife, a saw, a compass, all these different things that you need in that survival bag. So hence the 182 chapters.
I love it. I have to tell you that you've been an influence in my life, and you don't know it, in that after I read your book and I saw that you had all these chapters that were like a page and a half or 3 pages or 2.5 pages, and I saw you had 182 chapters, I thought, I don't have to write big, long 12, 15-page chapters in my book.
Yes.
I can just put more chapters in. And so my new book, which is
Good.
coming out soon, it's called You Are More Than You Think You Are. And what I did is I just took all of those things that I wanted to share with people, and I put them in like 4 to 5-page chapters. And I got that from you.
That's
I
perfect.
copied you
I
because
love
I
it.
thought, this is so cool. I don't care if my book has 70 chapters, if it covers everything I want, and they're a little short. I think people can read short
Yes,
chapters more
yes.
than they'll read long chapters.
Absolutely,
too.
absolutely. Our attention spans have shortened because information is now available to us immediately. When I was a child, I would have to get on my bike and drive to the library and go look something up, or look through the Encyclopedia Britannica and try to find something. Today, I just go on my phone, right? Tomorrow, in the future, I won't even have to go on my phone. I'll just think of a question, and the answer will come to me through the cloud. Kurzweil talks about this at Google. He talks about our neural cortex being connected to the cloud, and all of the information that's available on Google will be available through the cloud and will be accessible to us instantaneously. He talks about a hive mentality, that all of us, whatever you know, I'll know. Whatever I know, you'll know, because we'll all be connected and we'll have this shared community of information. So lifelong learning is huge. Even more important than lifelong learning is developing a love of learning, right? Love learning, like you love eating your favorite dessert, right? Just find things. There's so many things out there that are fascinating, that will really wake you up and change your perspective, broaden your understanding, give you new insights. And these are the things we're searching in a sea of information for what I call disconfirming information, right? Science progresses through disconfirming information. So I may think the world behaves a certain way or is a certain way or ought to be a certain way, and then I'll read something in a book and it'll open up my eyes to something that I hadn't seen before, and a light will go off and I'll think, wow, that's truth. I've just read truth, and that's different than what I thought. And so when you can have that opportunity to find those pieces of disconfirming information that change and broaden your perspective, it's like a treasure hunt. It's like finding something valuable. It's like finding gold.
Wow. Yes. When you were talking about that we're not going to have to learn through technology, we're just going to kind of download it into our brain.
Yeah.
It made me think, sometimes when I'm writing, I feel like I'm doing that already. Sometimes when I'm writing, I feel like things are just downloading and then it's coming out my
Yeah.
fingers onto the keyboard. And then the next day I'll read it and I'll think, did I write that? That's really good.
Well, what's interesting is that, so we have a conscious brain and we have an unconscious brain, right? Our brains, so what's happening there is your unconscious brain has that information. You're not consciously aware of it, but it's there. And then when you're writing and you're expressing yourself and it's just flowing through you, and then you look at it and it surprises you, it's you becoming conscious of unconscious knowledge that you had. And so that's what I think you're describing.
Well, that's what it feels like.
Yeah.
It's because I know I wrote it because it's there on my computer, on my paper, on my things, but I don't remember writing those particular words. Or I'll see the concept and I'll think, wow, that's a really good concept. I need to explore that further because it came from somewhere, but I didn't know where. I used to laugh when I was a child. I used to tell my mother that I thought my hair was antenna and that it was picking up messages from the universe and putting it in my head. And they used to laugh at me.
Yeah.
They thought that was something really wrong with this child, that she thought she had antenna in her hair. But you know what? It's kind of the same thing, isn't it? We're kind of picking up the messages.
What most people don't realize is that we have 11 million bits of information that impact our brain every second of the day from the day that we were born, right? 11 million bits of information per second. Something like 99, our conscious brain can only process 15 to 50 bits of information out of the 11 million per second.
Amazing.
So the rest of that information is coming into your brain through your unconscious, outside of your conscious awareness. So what you were describing was actually happening. It's just the way that it was being described made it sound, ridiculous, right? But when you understand the science behind it, it's actually true. It actually happens. We are repositories of far more information. Einstein said we use 10% of our brain. We use much less, probably much less. And that's because most of it, so our unconscious brain actually works, it uses that information, but we're not aware of it. So have you ever had the sensation that you're driving home and you're on autopilot? Mm-hmm. You're not even thinking about it, but you somehow just get home, right? There's a period of time that you're daydreaming, but you're making the right turns, you're going in the right direction, none of it is conscious, you're thinking about something else, but your brain is getting you there, right?
Yes.
That's your unconscious brain that's working.
Yes.
Your eyes, your breathing. You don't sit and think about how I need to breathe.
No.
Your brain is doing all of that outside of your conscious awareness. That, again, is your unconscious brain working for you.
So it does come down to we are so much more than we think we are.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It really does.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I had that. John will tell you. John runs the studio here, and he'll tell you one day I came in here and I looked like a mess. I just ran in to do something, and I had on a pair of old jeans and no makeup and just sunglasses, and I ran in, and there was this really good-looking man in here filming a TV show, and I just kept looking at him. I kept going, oh my goodness, he's just gorgeous, and he had this dynamic personality, and I did what I did as fast as I could and got out of here so nobody would see me. And I got in my car and I kept thinking about that man. And, I was driving, and the next thing I knew, I had driven like 3 miles further than wherever I wanted to go. And I called John and I said, I can't believe what I just did. I just drove, and my mind was totally on that man that was in your studio. Well, he went and told him, and the guy called me up. He says, "You want to have coffee?"
Oh, that's fantastic.
I'm like, "Sure."
That's so fantastic.
But it was funny because my mind was somewhere other than where I was driving. I didn't know where, but I was driving. I was safe. I was okay.
Isn't that funny how you manifested that thought and it resulted in an actual connection?
Yeah, I mean, he ended
Yeah.
up calling me and said,
Yeah.
"Do you want to have coffee?" And we had coffee, and actually, we've kind of become friends now because he wants to write a book, and
Yeah.
I've been talking to him about his book, and he has a TV show here at the station, and it's just funny, you know. Sometimes these things
Yeah.
create something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Life presents all these amazing opportunities and choices.
So, what influences how we make our choices?
Well, that's a good question. I think, you probably go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and there are certain things that are fundamental needs of ours, and so we want to satisfy. And it also, the answer to that question depends on who you are, where you are, what age you are, right? So young people, for example, they have their brains, all of our brains develop at a certain rate, right? So our amygdala, what we want, our desires, the things that we want, our id, if you will, what Freud called our id, those things are shaped right around puberty. We know that we want a car like that. We know that we want to go to Disneyland. We know what we want, right? But we don't always know what's good for us or what we need. And the reason for that is that the prefrontal cortex of our brain, the logical reasoning portion of our brain, doesn't fully develop until we're 25 or 26. So if you're dealing with an 18-year-old or you're dealing with a 20-year-old, physiologically, their brains are not fully developed. So if you're trying to reason with them logically and you're not getting through, part of the reason may be that their prefrontal cortex is not yet fully developed. That'll happen around 25 or 26. Those conversations will be much easier with your child when they're that age, right? The other thing is they might be feeling stress or anxiety because of what's going on in their life, right? And when that happens, our brains release chemicals, right? So adrenaline and cortisol, which actually block the prefrontal cortex from functioning, making it more difficult for us to reason logically. That also happens. So how are these choices influenced? They're influenced chemically, they're influenced environmentally, they're influenced circumstantially. So all of the things that happen in our lives influence the way that we make choices. And the best way to make good choices is to be grounded in certain values that inform your choices going forward, going back to character, right? If you value character and integrity, that becomes a core value, and that will influence your choices going forward, right? If you value family, if you value relationships, if you value your country and America, those concepts, those values will influence your choices going forward. And it's critical that you make good choices because our choices determine the lives that we lead. Good choices lead to good conclusions, and bad choices lead to bad results.
What do you think is the hardest choice you've ever had to make?
Wow. Choosing not to run again for Attorney General was a very, very difficult choice for me. I had incumbency. I was the incumbent. I had a 5-to-1 fundraising advantage over my opponent, who is now a United States Senator. I had always wanted to be in politics. It had always been a childhood dream of mine, so I was giving up something. I felt very confident that I could win and that I could go on to do other great things. It was tough. It was tough to walk away, but I knew that it was right. It was the right decision for me. And today, I would make the exact same decision. I would make the exact same decision to accept the appointment and to serve, and I would have made the exact same decision to not serve beyond the term that I served. It was an incredible experience. I'm glad I did it, but I'm also glad that I stopped. And I'm happier today, and I hope to make a more significant contribution in spite of not being in politics as a consequence of that decision.
Well, I think you do. I'm pretty sure that you do. I often read what you write on social media, and it's amazing how many people say, "Oh, thank you, George, for straightening us out," or "Thank you, George, for the correct information," or and you're making a big impact. And I think social media opens up an opportunity for us to make an impact that we've never had before.
I think it opens up a tremendous opportunity. Today, in fact, I was asked the question, what would you say if you were Trump's campaign manager and you were trying to get him reelected? What would you have him say in the debates? And I wrote out what I would have him say, and I've also written out what I would have Biden say if I were Biden's campaign manager, right?
Yeah.
And by doing that, you're showing people here's the whole picture, right? Now, some people will applaud what I said about Trump. The Trump fans will
Right.
think, my God, you articulated our position wonderfully, right?
Yeah.
But there's another side. There's the Biden position. And that can be articulated very forcefully and very persuasively as well.
Yes.
And if you're a Trump fan, you may not applaud my description of what Biden should say. But if you're a Biden fan, you will. And what's important is for people to see both. They need to
Yes.
see what are Trump's greatest strengths and his greatest weaknesses. What are Biden's greatest strengths and his greatest weaknesses? See the whole picture and then make your choices, right?
Yes.
Then make a good decision.
Yes. Yes.
So I can help with that through social media.
Well, you're good at it. How much control do you think we have over our choices?
Over our individual choices,
Yeah, our ability to choose. Well, let me go a little further. I think sometimes we think we're making a choice when we really don't know what the outcome will be either way.
Right.
Do we need to know the outcome of this choice versus the outcome of this choice before we make a choice, or do we just choose and pray?
no. I think that first of all, when we're making a choice, ultimately we have control over that choice. We're the person that pulls the trigger. We're the person that pushes the button, right? So ultimately, the power of our own individual choice rests, I believe, exclusively with us. However, our brains, the way our brains work, and the way that we are susceptible to influence outside of our conscious awareness can cause us to make those choices believing certain things to be true that are not true, right? So we can be misled. The human species is extremely capable. One of the things that I've learned that most surprised me is that we are extremely susceptible to manipulation. Our brains are extremely malleable, right? And there are so many examples of this. There have been researchers that have proven that they can take someone into a room and spend 2 to 3 weeks with them and convince an innocent person that they committed a murder, right? By constantly feeding them information where the brain starts to confuse memory with information that is more recently provided to them, right? So you can be tricked. Your brain can be tricked. We've learned more about the human brain in the last 5 years than in the last 5,000 years. Now that's a powerful tool in the hands of someone that wants to control us, right? And there are mechanisms. Social media is an incredibly powerful mechanism, as we just discussed, and it can be used for good or for bad.
Yes.
Social media could create a second enlightenment in the world, right? Where like the first enlightenment, mass quantities of people can raise their lifestyle and become more formidable, more successful, more resilient, more powerful through technology and through social media. Social media can also be used to manipulate that same mass of people into believing things that are not true and to making choices and making decisions that are not in their best interest, but that they believe are in their best
Yes,
interest.
yes.
So learning more about how your brain works and how you can harness this to your advantage and how you can protect yourself from manipulation and interference is essential. It's so important. I can't overstress it. And these are some of the things that I talk about in the book. I talk about how your brain works. I talk about cognitive dissonance. I talk about confirmation bias. I talk about motivated reasoning. I talk about tribalism and groupthink. I talk about how we are moved and manipulated by forces that we don't even see.
Yes.
And it's important for people to know that.
It is important for people to know that.
Yeah.
And I believe that so many of us don't know that.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't know it. I didn't know it before I began writing the book. My research into this book, in order to advise my daughter for the next 30 years, I started reading about the next 30 years. As a lawyer practicing for the prior 30 years, I had no reason to look at the next 30 years. Judy, if I were to ask you what's happening behind you right now, you wouldn't be able to tell me because you're not looking at it, right? You have to look at something to understand it, right? So I didn't understand any of this 5 years ago. It's because I started looking at it, and I started studying it, and I started researching it, that a whole new world of information opened up to me, and I learned things that I never knew. And you know, that's what reading can do. That's what a book can do. And so I've taken the thousands of different articles and the hundreds of different books that I've read, and I've curated it, and I've distilled it into bite-sized chapters.
Right.
And that's what Millennial Samurai is.
Right. So what's the next choice you have to make?
Well, the next choice that I have to make in my life, in my personal life, I'm in escrow on a property in Idaho. Right? So I found this beautiful piece of lakefront property that has this gorgeous view, and it's just like heavenly, right? And so I want to build a second home in Idaho, and I want to split my time. And so I'll be making a number of decisions along those lines. Later this week, I've been asked to come out to Newport Beach and meet with a company that has some amazing new technologies and possibly join their board of advisors. They're talking about an implant in the eye. The former head of Bausch and Lomb surgery has developed these surgical implants in the eye that he believes can connect with what someone like Elon Musk is doing with Neuralink, right? And rather than implanting in your brain, he believes that the better way is to implant in your eye, and he's formed a company called Cyber. And so I'm going out to meet with him on Friday and have dinner with him and possibly join his board of advisors. So these are the types of decisions that I've got to make.
Well,
they're all good.
Good luck.
They're all
it
good.
Sounds like they're pretty. There's some pretty interesting ones.
Well, also, I mean, I also have the decisions of you know, do I wear a mask? Do I go out? Am I going to catch COVID? How much interaction do I have? These are decisions that I make every day, that we all are making.
That we're all making.
That we're all making.
Mm-hmm.
So, and these could be critical, life and death decisions. I have, some health issues, right? I have asthma. I had a heart attack, right? I'm not a great candidate to catch COVID. It won't do well, perhaps, with me.
No.
So I wear a mask and I take precautions and I limit my exposure and I go out less. I don't take every appointment. This was a special appointment to me to come and meet you.
Thank you.
And so that's why I'm here. This appointment on Friday is a special appointment. So I'm going to that. But you won't find me all over the place today. I'm mostly at home. I'm mostly trying to lay low until we have better treatments. My philosophy is that if I can survive for the next 3 to 6 months, that new treatments and new procedures and new advances will come that will increase my likelihood of survival were I to get COVID. I don't take it lightly. I think it's a serious issue.
It is a serious issue. And I want to thank you for being here with us today, because you have certainly enlightened us. I mean, we're here to talk about your book, and we've learned so much. That's what's absolutely amazing. So thank you for spending your time with us. Would you please tell my audience how they can get a copy of your book?
Yes. So they can, there are two things they can do. They can go to millennialsamurai.com, and they can download a digital copy of the book for free. The entire book is available at millennialsamurai.com. You can download a digital copy for free. If you want the actual physical book, I personally like to have a physical book. If you want that, you need to go to Amazon and search Millennial Samurai, and you can get a digital copy of the book. I mean, a hard copy of the book.
A hard copy, yes, yes.
And Seize Your Destiny is also on Amazon.
Yes, and that's a good one too.
It's a great one for children.
Especially if they have younger children
Yes.
that they want to
Yes.
share those
Yes.
ideas with. It's
Yes.
very important.
Yes, for children under 18, get Seize Your Destiny, and for children over 18, get Millennial Samurai.
Wonderful. Thank you, George.
Thank
you
you
for being here.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us today. I hope that you got as much out of this as I did, because it's certainly been an educational experience as well as an enjoyable one. So make good choices. Choices. We have choices. They are the source of the success in our lives. When things happen to us, we can choose to believe they happened for a reason. We can discover opportunities in the most difficult experiences if we are willing to look for them. It is what we choose to think about each experience that determines how we respond to it. How we respond determines whether or not we find richer, more purposeful, more joyful lives. We are the only ones who can choose our attitudes and the principles that we live by. Choose well, my friends. Choose well.